Hi, welcome back to Kalike. I'm in front of you here with yet another session on electrostatics. So we'll continue our journey and learning on electrostatics by jumping on to the next topic. We learned all about Coulomb's law, how it is applicable to only point charges and what are point charges and how do you write Coulomb's law correctly in the vector format. What are the two different formats in which you can write it in terms of unit vector, also how you can write it in the format of a full vector. So we discussed both the equations yesterday. In fact, I took you back to understanding of how you represent a unit vector using the x, y and z coordinate axis with their respective unit vector along the x-axis, which we name as I cap, along the y-axis, which we name as j cap, and along the z-axis, which we name as k cap. And how do you find the magnitude of that resultant vector, which is pointing in all the directions in the sense which is in space, three-dimensional space. So we discovered all of that yesterday. If you have any questions, queries and comments, I'm more than happy to explain it to you again. We could if you have any questions, please comment in the previous video or in this video. We can take that up. I recommend you go back, watch that video, and where you'll really understand how do you state the Coulomb's law of force of attraction or repulsion between any 2-point charges. So what are the important terms that you must remember? You have to specify that they are point charges because the distance of separation between those charges is very much compared to the size of those charges themselves. So we refer always to those charges as point charges. Also, they are single charges. They're not right. Single point mass charges. And then what else do you say? You note that it is directly proportional to the product of the magnitude of the charges. So you spoke about the magnitude part, and what is the next magnitude part you are going to speak? It is inversely proportional to the square of distance of separation between the 2-point charges. So you spoke about the magnitude part of the Coulomb's law. Now how do you speak about the direction part of the Coulomb's law? You say that and this force acts only in the direction of the line joining the two charges. So the two charges are joined by a certain line, right? So you imagine a certain line joining the two charges. So either if this force is attractive, it will act towards one of those charges. If it is repulsive, it will act away from the direction of the charges. So in either case, it is going to act along the line joining the 2-point charges. So these are very specific terms that you need to remember, and you will understand why I am specifying on certain terms, why I am stressing again and again in most of my the past 3 videos where I started teaching you Coulomb's law. So I've made literally 3 videos. This is the 3rd video where I'm stressing most part on the Coulomb's law, especially on the point charges, especially on the directions, how you take your magnitude of a unit vector, how you write the unit vector, how you write a full, because these are the things very, very critical and fundamental that need to be crystal clear when you take up MCQs or when you take your entrance exam questions or when you solve your board examination questions. Otherwise, physics starts looking like a puzzle, numericals will be too scary, and yes, everything gets mixed up, right? So it is essential that the fundamentals need to be crystal clear from the beginning. So it is essential to understand the theory part really well so that you apply that in practicality when you have a numerical in front of you, right? So yes, so what are we going to study today? As I told you, we'll continue with the Coulomb's law. I'm going to introduce you a new concept. We'll learn a little bit more using the Coulomb's law, the extension of Coulomb's law. We are going to learn various other topics in electrostatics. So I will start with one of the examples. I'll tell you an interesting fact. Now let's imagine you have a neutral conductor. What do you mean by neutral conductor? Imagine this is some metal. Okay. Now this is neutral. When I say neutral, I meant in charges, right? The charges are neutral. So what do you mean by neutral charges? That means this is not charged. What do you mean by this is not charged? It means it has equal number of electrons and equal number of positively charged particles. So the number of negatively charged particles is equal to the number of positively charged particles. So number of positively charged particles is exactly equal to the number of electrons or negatively charged particles in this case. So let me write here, it could be positive, this could be negative, positive, negative. Okay, so it is something like this, positive, negative. So the net charge on the system will be 0 because each one of them are equal in number. They pull and repel each other with an equal amount, and hence the total charge on the system will be 0, right? So the net charge on the system here is 0. Net charge, which is written as Q net. Why am I representing it by capital Q? Because I assume it to be a big charge. So Q net is equal to 0 in this case. Now let's say I want to charge this metal, or I want to charge this conductor, but by not touching it. I do not want to bring anything in contact. I do not want to bring another metal rod and rub it against this metal and then charge it, but I want to charge it by without bringing any conductor into contact with this metal, which is, which has a neutral charge. Can we achieve that? Let's try and do it. Let's try to understand and break down every detail and understand how you can actually charge a neutral metal using a conductor which is already charged, okay, but not by bringing it into contact with the metal, right? But without touching, what else can I do? So let's say let's assume another situation. This was your case 1. So this was the given scenario. Now another scenario, what I'm trying to do is the same metal, I'll rewrite the same diagram. So you have the same metal which is neutral in charge. So it has equal number of positively charged particles and equal number of negatively charged particles, isn't it? Okay, gone out of hand. So this is plus, minus, minus, which is potentially a net charge on the system. Now what do I want to do? I want to bring a charged rod, metal rod, or a charged conductor for that matter, bring it close to it, but do not touch it with the metal rod and try to charge this metal. So what am I going to do? I'll bring a metal rod. Okay, imagine this is a metal rod which is positively charged. Okay, this is positively charged. Now I bring it closer. Okay, here you see there is no contact. There is absolutely no contact between the two conductors. So this is your case 2. Now what will happen? I am trying to charge this neutral charge where the Q net is 0, right? I am trying to charge this by bringing another charged material. How is it charged? I assume that there are excess of positively charged particles on this metal rod. By that I mean it is a positively charged rod that is brought not in contact, but it is brought closer to another neutral conductor, and I'm trying and testing if I could charge it. Now here is the trick or the twist. I notice after some time I try to measure the charge. I try to measure whether it is electrified or not, whether this conductor which was neutrally charged, where the net charge on the system was 0, you see that it has acquired some charge without this conductor being in contact with this, but being closer to it. Now, how do you measure that charge? You measure using an instrument called gold leaf electroscope or a leaf electroscope, which we have already studied in our very first class in the beginning when I started teaching you electrostatics. So there will be some charge. Now, I'll give you some time, as I usually do in my class. I want you to think, how will this charge conductor, which is not going to be in contact with the metal, going to charge this metal? How are you able to measure some electrification? How are you able to see that there is some net charge on the system? The system has acquired some net charge after this was brought closer. So now that I've paused for a while, I assume that most of you were able to answer this question. If not, here's the reveal. So what really happened behind the scenes? What made this neutral conductor with a net charge of 0 to acquire some charge? If it acquired some charge, Did it acquire an excess of electrons, or did it acquire an excess of protons, which is positively charged particles? So did we refer to this as positively charged metal rod now, or a negatively charged metal rod now, depending on the excess or the deficit of electrons? So to understand that, let's break it down and see what really happened. Now let's go back to the basics again. What does your basic properties of charges say? That like charges repel and unlike charges attract, right? So do you see any like charges between these two conductors? Yes. Here it has positive charge, here also it has positive charge. It could have positive charge on the either side also. I mean, just to make you understand, I have written the positive charge first. So what should happen between these two positive charges, although they are not in contact? Since this identifies the presence of another likely charge, which is a positive charge, this starts experiencing a repelling force and it starts drifting away from this positive charge. So what will happen to the metal as such? The metal starts redistributing the charges inside the metal, on the metal surface. The charges get redistributed according to or minding the properties of electrostatics, that is the properties of charges, that like charges repel and unlike charges attract. So what is going to happen? Let's understand it diagrammatically. So now the rearrangement after redistribution, okay, so after some time and after redistribution, redistribution of what? Redistribution of charges. We see the result. What is the result? The result is the metal rod is as such. There is no change. Nothing won't be happening on this metal rod, which was already positively charged. So you have this positively charged metal rod. Now what is happening inside or on the surface of this conductor? Since the positive charge was closer to the positive charge on the rod, although it was not in contact, it does experience some invisible force. It feels, it feels or it gets scared by the presence of another positively charged particle. So what happens practically? It senses that there is some positive charge around it and it starts drifting away from its position. It starts drifting away. So what happens? They start, if I have to show it step by step, the negative charge comes here, the positive charge comes here. Okay, and there is another positive charge, right? So there are two more positive charges. So they start drifting away. So this starts drifting away here and this shifts also here, and the negative charge comes and drifts away here. So basically it has moved away. This shows there is some repulsion. So what is acting? The repulsive force is what is causing the rearrangement or redistribution of the charges on the surface of this conductor, even without the metal rod not touching it. So it is allowing the charges to redistribute only by the fundamental property of the charges, which is like charges repel and unlike charges attract. Just like the positively charged particles experience a repulsive force and start moving away from the positive charge of the conductor, similarly the negatively charged ions in the metal or on the surface of the metal start experiencing an attractive pull or attractive force. So they come and align closer. They just can't come out of it, because why can't they come and jump and get attracted here? What is between these? You have something called air. So what is air? Air is basically an insulator, right? So air is an insulator. Even this positively charged particles want to go out and go as far as away from the positively charged particles on the metal. They want to get out of this metal, but again here it is all filled with something called air. Air is a very bad conductor. Instead of saying a bad conductor, we use the term it's an insulator, which will not allow easy passage of any charged particle into it. So what happens? You see a buildup of positively charged particles on one end, and you also see a buildup of negatively charged particles on the other end, only due to the basic and the fundamental property of electrostatic charges, which says that the like charges repel and the unlike charges attract. So now you know why we stress upon the very fundamentals of the theory, because this is what helps you understand any numerical or any given situation in physics. You may feel, oh, what's really happening? I don't really understand. I mean, we didn't do anything. We just used the very basic property like charges repel and unlike charges attract. If they repel, how far they repel? It also depends on the magnitude of these two charges. But yes, it wants to go infinitely far away from this positively charged, which is not practically possible because this metal sheet or metal surface or conductor that we have, which was electrically neutral, is a finite shape. It is not an infinitely long metal sheet. So basically it has to go get drifted away on another side where it will feel less repulsion. If there was a chance, these would jump away and go as farther as possible from these positively charged particles. But what is stopping it not to go away and be held inside the metal surface or on the surface? Only the atmosphere on the medium that is surrounding that conductor, which is air, because air is an insulator and it does not allow free passage of any charged particles into it. So that is the only hindering factor. So what is, let us write all, and then we'll go a step further and you'll see how mesmerizing all this is. And you really start appreciating electrostatics, because it was the basic law that these people discovered, scientists discovered, that like charges repel and unlike charges attract, and that is leading us to whole new discoveries of lot of properties of electrostatic field as electrostatic charges. And it opens up a whole new chapter. You start learning a lot more about charges, only those two basic properties, which are very important. And also, why do I stress upon something called point charges, and also the direction of the field? All these play a very, very crucial role. So it is essential that you I stress, and you also stress upon those points and try to understand it. Basically, these should be crystal clear to understand any concept very easily or solve any numerical easily in physics. Okay, so now what will happen? Similarly, another line here also, the negative charges come lined up, right? So the positive charges on the other hand getting repelled away, unable to go out of the conductor because there is air outside, and air doesn't allow easy passage of the electrons into it because it acts as an insulator. So this was our step 3. Now what will happen to step 4? Now can I say it is what is the net charge on the system still? The net charge on the system is still 0. So we are not yet successful in electrifying this object or making it acquire an excess of electrons or an excess of positively charged particles, because earlier there were 2 protons and 2 electrons. Even now they are the same, but they are separated by a distance because of a basic law in physics called like charges repel and unlike charges attract. Now here's the twist, here's the question. I want you to understand, how can I now make it charged? Should I bring this in contact? Are we going to bring this in contact? No. The very first condition of this entire scenario was you have to literally charge this metal or conductor which had a net charge of 0 to some charge, to some net charge. It should have some value without bringing another conductor into contact. So what are we going to do? I'll pause for a while, I'll allow you to think, and then of course I'm going to reveal always as I do. So I'm pausing for a while. I hope you got the answer. The answer to this is, I think most of you got it. So the 4th step is, what we are going to do is, what has happened currently, let's write the scenario. The current scenario we have is, there are 4 charged particles. I'm just writing for the sake of understanding it, and negatively charged particles aligned on one end closer to the positively charged particles experiencing a force of attraction, and the positively charged particles on the metal surface experiencing a force of repulsion are drifted as far as away from the positively charged particles. But the whole goal of achieving or electrifying or charging this body without bringing another conductor into contact is not yet achieved. Now, the whole twist is, we know that Earth is a very big conductor. We know air is not a good conductor, but we do know that Earth is a very good conductor. So what do? We keep this, or we connect this to Earth. Just connect this conductor to Earth. So when you earth it, Earth has an excess of electrons. There are plenty of excess electrons on the surface of Earth. So what will happen? These electrons experience, and they start experience. You have connected it. See, there is no gap air here. So there is a conductor. This is a conductor. You connect, right? This is a conductor. You are basically conducting it, connecting it with the wire. So this is also a metal wire. Now what happens? These electrons start flowing or start experiencing again an attractive force due to excess of positively charged particles. In other words, these positively charged particles got a way to escape out of the metal conductor through a wire which is connected to Earth. So the positively charged particles start flowing in this direction, and the negatively charged particles start entering the metal sphere, start entering this conductor with the wire. So what do you see? There is a loss of positively charged particles and there is an addition of negatively charged particles only by connecting it to Earth with the help of a conductor or a wire. So we were able to achieve the fact that excess of something entered and there was a deficit of something. These were lost, they went to the Earth because again of a very basic fundamental property called like charges repel and unlike charges attract. So what is the fourth scenario? Now fourth scenario is, so you had this rod. Now it doesn't matter whether you have this or not. What you finally achieved by this was positively charged particles went into the ground and negatively charged particles came here in this place. So all the 8 are gone and it is replaced by 8 more electrons. So it's all electrons and all of them are experiencing, there is no gap between them because all of these are experiencing a pull towards the positively charged particles. So what is the net charge on the system? We say there is certainly a net charge on the system because none of them cancel each other. They all add up because all of them are, although they want to repel each other, they are like charges, but still they experience an attractive force because there is another metal carrying a positively charged particle. So now you have achieved some net charge on the system. Now let's remove this conductor. Since there is an excess of electron on this conductor, we have successfully charged a conductor not by bringing another conductor into contact. When I mean contact, I meant to touch them. We just placed it at a distance and we were able to achieve to charge that conductor only by two properties of charges, that repulsive force and attractive forces are experienced by like charges and unlike charges respectively. So that is the fundamental thing which made us understand this whole concept, and this type of charging is what we know or what we call as charging by induction. So this whole thing is you are charging a conductor by inducing charges by the method of charging by induction. So what do you mean by induction? You are inducing charges, you are inducing excess of charge, you are separating them, you are redistributing them, then connecting to the earth, making excess electrons come into the conductor. So you are basically inducing charges, you are not creating anything new, you are redistributing them using the basic law of electrostatics, like charges repel and unlike charges attract, and you're able to achieve a whole new explanation. You see, it's a very good understanding of electrostatic charges. I hope this was clear. Let's go to the next concept now. Okay, so now I hope the other charging by induction was pretty clear to you. There is one more thing that we need to understand about charging by induction to open up another new concept in electrostatics. Before that, I'd like you to understand that there are three ways that you can charge any given body, or there are two kinds of forces that are generally found in nature. One is a contactual force, or another is action at a distance force. So what do you mean by that? One is a contactual force. We just call it contact forces, right? Where actually, what do you mean by contact forces? For a body to apply force on another body or to experience force from another body, the two bodies have to be in contact to experience it. Bodies are in contact with each other in order to experience this force. Such forces are contact forces. For example, you see, there is imagine this is a plane on which there is a body. Now, if you need to pull it, you literally have to pull it, apply pull, right? Use your hand to pull it in this direction. If you want to push it, you literally have to push it using a tool or your own hand. So you are in contact with the body. There is contact between the two bodies, your hand or a tool and the block, right? Contact between the two bodies. Such forces are known as contactual forces. And the example for such a force is friction, where friction requires two bodies to be in contact with each other to act in a particular direction. Another type of force is what is known as action at a distance force, just like the one that we read in charging and induction. That was the reason I specifically spoke about charging by induction now, when I wanted to introduce something new, especially after learning Coulomb's law and redefining Coulomb's law, explaining it properly in my second session on Coulomb's law. So therefore, another is what is known as action at a distance force. What do you mean by action at a distance? Action, this force can take action, or a body can experience action or reaction even at a distance. They need not be in contact. Here the two bodies are not really in contact, just like what happened in the earlier case when we were trying to charge a body by bringing another charged body without both of them being in actual contact with each other, but there was a separation distance. They were acting at a particular distance from each other. Such forces where the two bodies the two bodies are not in contact at all. Such forces are called as action at a distance forces. What are the examples for such kind of forces? Gravitational force is one such force, where you see literally, you throw something. If I throw this chalk, you see that I don't see there is any force, but when do you know there is a force? There is some force acting on it when I drop it. It moves with a certain acceleration, and I know that there is certainly some force probably pulling it towards it. I can't see the force, it's an invisible force, but it was acting at a distance from the chalk piece, and it literally pulled it towards its particular at a distance towards it. So gravitational force is one such example where you can understand it's an action at a distance force, gravitational force. There is another force which we will understand now, that is the electrostatic force, can also act at a particular distance, not just by two bodies being in contact, which we saw just now, because of only the fundamental properties of charges. So this electrostatic force can also be an action at a distance force. Magnetic force is also not seen, they're not necessary, they have to be in contact. Even when you have magnet in hand, there are iron filings at a certain distance, you see that they get pulled away towards the magnet. So that force is also an action at a distance force. So these are examples of different kind of contactual and action at a distance forces. Now we are going to learn two more kinds of contactual forces. We spoke about action at a distance, which was charging by induction. We will learn about two more contactual forces in electrostatics, where we are trying to literally charge a sphere or charge a body, a neutral body, giving an excess of electrons or making it a deficit of electrons by bringing another charged body into contact with it. We make them touch each other, and such forces are called contactual forces. Both are possible in electrostatics only by using the basic properties of electrostatics or charges. Another method is charging by friction, right? Charging by friction. You can charge a body with another body just by rubbing each other. You take plastic, if this is plastic and this is wool, you rub them together. So what happens? There is basically transfer of electrons or positively charged particles from one body to another body. So we have seen this. You take a balloon, you rub it against your hair, you bring that balloon, your hair must be dry, it should not be oily, it should not be wet. If you have dry hairs, you take a balloon or you take a comb, rub it as hard as possible. So what happens? Excess electrons from the hair transfer to the comb, and when you bring it close to a neutral body like paper, they do get attracted, because again by the same law of electrostatics, where like charges repel and unlike charges attract. So probably if that is getting attracted, there might be opposite charges, that is why they are attracting each other. So it is as simple as that. There is one more thing that we study as a contactual force. One more method of charging is charging by conduction. Charging by friction, charging by induction, and charging by conduction. So how do you charge by conduction? It is again, you bring them into contact, you bring one body, you touch, basically make those bodies touch each other, and there is an exchange of charge, just like what happens in friction. You rub one against the other. Here you literally connect them together. So the charge on one body flows into another body. One of the bodies acquire excessive charge, thereby charging the another body, right? So these are different methods of charging body, and there are two types of forces that you basically need to understand, that they are contactual and non-contactual forces. Non-contactual forces are also referred to as action at a distance forces, and examples for those are gravitational force, the electrostatic force that we saw now, and also the magnetic force, which we will study further in class 12, which is going to be super interesting. Well, now it's time to explore one more important concept, or one more important property that I've been stressing, that Coulomb's law acts or is valid only for point charges. So that part will become clear when we start, extending what we have learned. So we just spoke about action at a distance force, where, we charge the body by the method of induction, by not bringing it into contact, but by just using the force. Like charges repel and unlike charges attract, the properties of the charges. So using the same methodology, I will show you that Coulomb's law is certainly valid only for point charges. Now imagine what happened. So I'll redraw the diagram that we had. You had a positively charged conductor which had an excess of positive charges, right, on the surface, and you had a metal where you saw that there was a redistribution, right? So finally you charged it, and it was negatively charged everywhere. Or even before that, the very first scenario where you had positive charges here, and there were positive, negative was the scenario, right? This has to be negative, positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, and negative. This was how it was initially when before they started redistributing. Now, after they started redistributing, what you saw was this, right? So the positive charges experiencing a repulsive force going farther away from these positive charges on the metal rod, which was used to charge this rod, right, or add excess or deficit of electrons. So the electrons started pulling force, experiencing pulling force due to this. So there is a attraction here, right? These are getting attracted, whereas these want to move away, right? These want to move away. So these are at a distance R1, these are at a distance R2. There are different charges. Now there is an array of charges. So if I have to define, the force of attraction here, force of repulsion, because I've called this as R1. by Coulomb's law, it is going to be 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. If I call this charge, I mean, there are a number of charges. I don't know what to call these charges. I simply call it as Q1 and Q2. There are a number of charges. So for each charge, you have to literally calculate the force. It's going to be tough. Divided by, I'm just showing you. You have some value, right? And F2 also, you have some value, right? Divided by so and so and divided by R2 square, right? Now, you see that since the distance is small, this is small, right? So this value will be greater. F2 will be greater than F1, the repulsive force. But then you see that they have equal number of charges. They're literally not experiencing any force. When you calculate, the net charge on the system is 0, right? The net charge on the entire system is 0. So when I mathematically substitute the value of 0, because the charge on this conductor is 0 when it is in neutral condition, the charge on this, this has some excess charge, I can still put the value. I see that actually it has to be 0. Force has to be 0. It is not really experiencing any force because, although they are redistributed, it is not, you are not successful in charging it unless you connect it to earth using a metal wire, right? So does that mean Coulomb's law fails to explain this? Is there a limitation to Coulomb's law that we must know? Yes, you guessed it right if you have guessed it right. If not, I'm going to reveal the answer. See, Coulomb's law was defined for two charges that are separated by a distance, and we specifically called this charge as point charges only for a specific reason. So, Coulomb's law is applicable only for charges which are point charges, which are negligible in size compared to the distance of preparation. And there were only two charges in picture, not an array or redistribution of charges like this. Here you see there is a distribution of charge. So for the distribution of charge, we have not used Coulomb's law and derived something, but as of now, we are only successful in using Coulomb's law for only 2 point charges. Here it is not point charge, you have a large number of charges and it's an array or a row of charges or a column of charges, and we do not know how to use this law. So even though if they are experiencing some force, we fail to define it using it because we have not arrived at any expression where you are successful in using Coulomb's law or deriving for using Coulomb's law where you could define it for an array or a row of charges. So this is very crucial, which we will discuss in distribution of charges in the coming class. Hopefully in this class, if the session goes too long, I'll split it in the next session because I want to explain it in detail, because these things are very crucial. They seem very minor, but they are very, very crucial things when it comes to problem solving, entrance examination questions, and they make a very important fundamental part, and fundamentals are really, really important and they have to be crystal clear. Okay, so Coulomb's law only applies to point charges. This is very important point that you must keep in mind. So far in understanding all these concepts which look really scary and we don't really understand, we used only basic properties that we have been stressing upon from the last 3 sessions, that point charges are really crucial. You apply Coulomb's law for only point charges, and the other law that we used was like charges repel and unlike charges attract. So the repulsive force and the attractive force played a role in charging a conductor which had a net charge of 0, but it was so simple, but it looked complicated when the scenario was given, right? So it is essential to understand these fundamentals of electrostatics before you proceed further and start solving problems. That is why only after completing the entire chapter, we are going to take up numericals, so that our knowledge of, understanding the fundamentals of electrostatics should be crystal clear in order to solve these numericals. It gives you an added strength, extra value, adds extra value to you. You might, it will be easy to guess with all this knowledge. So elaborate theory sessions are required, especially when you are learning fundamentals, because it gets complicated after a while, and it may not seem complicated if your fundamentals are really right, in the right place. So now, since we've been only talking about the fundamental properties and also a very fundamental thing that Coulomb's law applies to only point charges, let us now consider a point charge and define something more interesting. It will open a whole new world of electrostatics in front of you, and it is really very, fascinating. And we will emphasize on certain points. So the very emphasis was on point charge, right? So the whole, interest of my whole interest of introducing charging by conduction or action under distance forces and contactual forces was only to specify a certain point that you use fundamentals to understand a given situation, or you specify that Coulomb's law is applicable to point charges. So there is a point charge. Imagine you have a point charge. There is plus q. Okay, this is a point charge placed at the origin O. Now, okay, so imagine there is no one. There is no other charge. Now I want to measure what is the force it can exert on any given charge. Now, is this charge visible to you? No. We cannot see charges, right? In practicality, you cannot see a charge. Do you see, you see masses, right? So for example, moon is in its place, or all other planets are revolving or rotating in its own place only because of the fact there is gravitational force acting between all these masses, right? They are orbiting in their own orbit so far because of the gravitational force. So just like gravitational force is an invisible force, even this force that will be created, or the area of influence that this charge, point charge q, is going to create around itself, the aura it will have around itself, is invisible too. We can't see. How do we foresee? How do we experience this? So certain things can be experienced. Just like I drop this chalk and this chalk experiences a pull towards the earth, or as when you fall from a certain height and you experience a pull towards the earth, it is an experience that needs to be experienced. Force is an experience. Now you cannot see it. So this whole experience, how do you experience? You certainly need another charge there for it to either experience a push or a pull, right? So like if those two are like charges, it will experience a repulsive force. If they are unlike charges, it will experience an attractive pull towards the source charge. So why do I call this as the source charge? So this is the source. What is the source? This is one thing that is creating some area of influence. For example, it will create its own area of influence. Just like the gravitational pull, it creates its own. After a certain distance, after you go beyond a certain distance from the earth, you might not feel that pull. When you start moving at a certain velocity or acceleration, you might not experience that pull. So it will have its own area of influence. Okay, so anything that comes into this area of influence will experience that pull or push. Now, to understand this fully, I would like you to understand the analogy of spider web. Okay, let's consider this. Now, imagine there is a spider. Now, I can't draw a spider properly, so I'll just imagine this is a spider sitting here, and it's got its own web. Okay, this is a spider web. It is being knitting this spider web. It has spun it around, all around. Okay, now this spider web is invisible to, this is something invisible to predators, to its prey. Okay, so it is invisible to other spiders, let's say, or other bigger insects. Smaller, it is invisible to other smaller insects, and let's say even the spiders. Okay, let's say other spiders which might be big, right? So I'm referring, so this is the spider sitting right here. Now it has created its own area of influence, and that is invisible to the other insects. Now, when will they experience the pull or push by the spider? Only when another insect comes and sits somewhere here. Accidentally, if another fly comes and sits here, or an insect comes and sits here, what will happen? Now this spider sitting here, how will it know that there is another fly or insect, another unlike, animal is sitting here. So the spider belongs to a certain category, fly or insect belong to a certain category of animals or insects. So therefore they are just like the unlike charges, right? So they are not the same in characteristics. They are different in characteristics. So it is as good as treating them as unlike charges in electrostatics. So something tells this spider that a fly has been caught in the spider net or the spider web. What is that? This string or this area of influence which it has spun around itself tells it or passes information saying that something has been caught. It's a fly. So suddenly it uses its force through the string and pulls it towards it and eats it, or they become one, they come closer. Now imagine there is another big spider caught here. So it is a similar kind of charge. This is another spider that is caught here in the spider web. Accidentally it couldn't see and it has been caught. Now this spider, imagine it is not as big as the one it is here. So this in area of influence or the net that is spun around the small spider sitting here communicates that there is another big spider awaiting or being knitted in this circle of influence. So now the spider is worried whether it should pull it or push it away using the string or using the area of influence that is being spun around it. So what it will do, since they are like, they belong to the same category of insects, just like the like charges, it knows that this can be a threat to it, so it starts repelling it, it starts pushing it with the help of the string in the opposite direction, right? So this is the source. So this is the source which created everything. These are the ones which accidentally got caught into the area of influence that was spun or the web that was spun by the source. So they became accidentally they came into those spider nets and they started experiencing it. So these are called test animals, and since they were unlike, it started attracting it, pulling it towards it. Since these were like and it was bigger, it started repelling it in the opposite direction. This is just an analogy to understand how electric forces work. So just like that, when you have a point charge sitting somewhere in this room, where I stand here, there might be enormous point charges which I might not realize or you might not realize that must be sitting around there where exactly you are listening to me. So they have their own area of influence, just like the gravitational field or just like the spider net. Or even when you have a torch, you go in the dark, you switch on the torch, it is pitch dark and you see there is a circle. It has its own area of influence, and in that area of influence you are able to catch flies, insects and whatever is there. So that is something visible to you. These forces like electrostatic force or the area of influence that they create around a specific point charge are invisible to the human eye, not only to the human eye, even to other charges. It's like just like you can experience it. Suppose you do not know, somebody is wearing a scent or a fragrance for that matter and they're standing in a particular room, and before you enter the room you don't even know that there is this area of that smell of fragrance has spread around a particular area up to a certain diameter. When you go there, if it is appealing to you, if you get attracted to the smell. If it is very not appealing to you, disappealing, then you feel like going away from that room as quickly as possible. It is simply like that. These analogies not only help us understand but also help us visualize how a charge sitting in a particular room or sitting around us now is actually creating some area of influence. We experiencing it only when there is a push or a pull, and when we try to measure that push or a pull. So how do we know that there is an area of influence? We need to test it. So what do we just send a test charge. We send a small charge and we refer to this charge as the test charge, because you are basically sending that charge to test if there is an area of influence around this charge, right? So this is creating the force or the area of influence, and we refer to this charge as the source charge. So there could be one charge here, I do not know. So but if I have a charge with me and I know I'm putting it in a particular area, I'm leaving it there and I'm trying to study with what force. I have a microscope or whatever, and I try to figure out whether it is experiencing some force. If it experiences an attractive force, it moves in the opposite direction or in this direction. I know there might be something around it. There might be a source charge which is creating that area of influence, causing the test charge which I have just put in to experience that force of repulsion or attraction. And this area that is surrounded around a source charge is what is referred to as field, the field of influence of force, right? So this field of influence of force is what is referred to as electric field in electrostatics. This is electric field, right? This is a very, very important term. It is denoted by the letter E. So E, which is the field of influence of the force around a source charge, is what is referred to as electric field. So how do we test it? You put in a test charge, a charge experiencing some force, then you know that there is some field. So how do you mathematically define this field? So electric field basically is the force experienced by a test charge. Force experienced by what? By a test charge. So this is the test charge experiencing some force. That is why you refer to this as, this area of influence of force as electric field. Now, if the field, if it experiences a larger force of repulsion or attraction, we know that the field or that it has created, the force it has created around itself is stronger, or if it experiences a very minimum motion, change of place from this force of attraction or force of repulsion, moves slightly from its position or displaces slightly from its position, this test charge, then we know that it has created a very less area of influence. The electric force created around itself is weak, which tells us, that brings us to the explanation called, and this stronger force or weaker force is defined by a term called electric intensity. So it tells you how intense is the field. If it is too intense, the electric field is high. If it is too less, the force is less intense, then it is a weak field. So electric field, is it a vector? Yes, it is a vector because it is measured in terms of force experienced by a test charge. So what is E? E is, electric field is force divided by Q, right? Or force is equal to Q into E. This is another definition that you can remember, right? Now, how do we write the SI unit for it? SI unit for electric field is force by Q. We'll do that. I do not have enough space. I'll erase this and we'll continue this part. So now what did we write? We wrote electric field is the force experienced by the test charge. So if this is the source charge plus Q, it creates its own area of influence in all directions, right? So any test charge placed at a point P, imagine this is at a point O, you have kept a test charge, it experiencing a push or a pull, depends upon the force experienced by the test charge. In other words, force is given by Q into electric field. Stronger the electric field or stronger the measurement of force, stronger the magnitude of force experienced, you say electric intensity or electric field intensity is more. You call that intensity is because you are measuring the force. Electric field intensity is more, vice versa, right? Versa, you say it is less. It experiences less force, less magnitude of force. You call the electric field intensity to be weak. It's a weak field. Now let's define the SI unit. Let's write the SI unit for electric field. So what is the SI unit? SI unit is electric field is equal to force divided by charge. What is force? Force is mass times acceleration divided by charge. So charge, what is charge? Charge is current. Current is measured in ampere. Current into time, right? So T times 1. So I will write it. Charge is current multiplied by time. So therefore it is, current is measured in ampere. So ampere is A. So if you write it in dimensions, it has to be t to the power 1, right? Like this. Now, how do you measure acceleration? A mass is m, acceleration is distance by time square or velocity by time, right? Acceleration is change in velocity by time. So that will be mass, will leave mass as such unless I figure this out. So velocity is again distance divided by time. You already have one more time. So this will be mass is m, distance is L, time is t into t, that will be t power 1, which will be mass into length into time is t to the power, bases are same, powers should be added, 1 plus 1. So this will be m L divided by t to the power of 2. This will be m1 L1 t to the power of minus 2. So this is what is for force. Now if you substitute all of that here, we will write it here. So it is m1 L1 t minus 2 divided by, what was that? A t minus 1. So this will be written as, I'll just make space. So we write it. So mass is 1, length is 1. This is minus 1. If it goes to the numerator, it will be plus 1. Minus 2 plus 1, I will rewrite it if you have any confusion. I don't want you to have any confusion. Minus 1 when it goes to the numerator changes its sign and becomes plus 1. So since the bases are same, I am adding the bases, I am adding the powers. Minus 2 plus 1 and a to the power 1, and it goes to the numerator, it becomes minus 1. So it has to be m1 L1 t minus 1 a to the power of minus 1. Did we miss something? Oh, sorry. This was a t, right? Okay, we missed something. It was a into t to the power of 1. So when it goes plus 1, when it goes to the numerator, it becomes minus 3. So therefore it is minus 2 minus 1, it has to be minus 3. So m1 L1 t minus 3 a power minus 1 is the dimension of the electric field. I hope that part is clear. Now, can we apply Coulomb's law and find out the expression for electric field? Yes, we can. We'll erase this part and do it. So now let's write the dimensions. We have written the dimensions. These are the dimensions. These are all very important, from your examination point of view, MCQ point of view. So electric field is equal to force divided by charge, right? So let's figure out. Now, does this charge obey Coulomb's law? Yes, it does, because there were 2-point charges we were talking about, right? Creating its own field of influence, placed at O, placed at P. So it does obey Coulomb's law because we are referring to point charges. So any point charge would obey Coulomb's law, unlike what we learned in charging by induction, because we saw a row or a column of charges, an array of charges where we couldn't apply Coulomb's law, but here we can, because we are only talking about a point charge. So a single charge for that matter. Now E is equal to F by Q. What is the expression for F? So 1 by Q I will separate, which is F. F is Coulombian force. So 1 by Q into Coulombian force is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q into Q, Q into Q divided by, if the distance of separation was R, it will be R square. So Q and Q get cancelled. So what becomes the expression for electric field? Electric field is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught to Q divided by R square. So what does the field of influence depend upon? It, unlike Coulomb's law, it does not depend upon the product of the magnitude of the charges, but it only depends on the magnitude of the source charge. This is very, very crucial. So if you understand all these fundamentals really well, then solving numericals becomes a piece of cake. There won't be any ambiguity. So it depends here again, medium, all that depends. We have spoken, we have made a large detailed class about permittivity. If you have any questions, go see it.
watch it to understand more about permittivity. So electric field, it basically depends upon the magnitude of the source charge, and just like Coulomb's law, it inversely depends upon the square of the distance of separation between the charges. But it does not as such depend upon the test charge. Why? Because we are using the test charge only to test the force of influence around this source charge. We want to measure this force, right? So if you take a huge charge and try to measure this, obviously this charge will also exert a lot of influence on the test charge. So we are basically using a very minimal charge. We are using a unit test charge. So we define the electric field here as electric field or the area of influence around a source charge is equal to the force experienced by test charge if you are using a unit positive charge. So you are basically using a unit positive charge, right? So it could be 1 microcoulomb or just 1 coulomb, although it is a very huge charge, but here we are taking a big charge. So so you're basically using a minor charge because you don't want that charge to alter the force of influence already created by this charge, but we are using it only. That is why it is referred to as a test charge, and this is referred to as a source charge because it creates that field of influence around it. So please remember, in force, Coulomb's law, according to Coulomb's law, force depends on magnitude, product and magnitude of both the charges, whereas the field only depends on the source charge because we have assumed the test charge to be of negligible amount or magnitude. It does not really alter the field, so we do not need to take into account of the magnitude of the test charge. I hope this part was clear. If it's not clear, rewatch it. Any questions, you can always come back. And yes, so I wanted to introduce the concept of distribution of charges, but then I think it will be too much for one video. So we do not want to have a over cognitive load. Watch this. In the next session, we'll take up redistribution of charges, where we are going to not just learn the definitions, but really understand what happens when we are talking about distribution of charges in various cases, because they are again crucial for solving a number of MCQs and numericals. If these concepts are really clear, then problem solving, as I said, is a piece of cake. So yeah, it's good if you take care of the fundamentals of electrostatics just like we did now, then certainly electrostatics is going to take care of you and numericals become super easy. See you in the next class.